Dajaha, hi guys, it's Janae and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm reacting to another AvenueX video. I'm really excited for it. I enjoyed the last one so much and I hope I'll be able to do even more. But today I am getting tips on how to flirt because, as you might have heard, as I mentioned before, I am painfully single. So yeah, no, who better to mentor me than our dear Wen Kexing? So that is what we're doing today. I'm really excited for it because obviously a lot of you comment and tell me about the poetry and its meaning and so on, but I'm just kind of excited to watch a video that encapsulates at least the ones that featured in episode 1 to 14. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into today's video.
This is my first video and there will be more on word of honors, literature, poetry, folk culture references to allow the two male leads to flirt under broad daylight. In this video, we're going to cover episode 1 to episode 14, the stuff that I've noticed, stuff that's worth talking about, because this drama is set in a fictional time. So you can't quite tell what is the specific dynasty the characters are living in. They're referring to literature that comes from all times. Wen Kexing, as a character written in the drama version, he is a very heavy poetry user. So he tends to recite a poem before he starts to talk about something. The poem doesn't have to be directly flirtatious or really referring to anything specifically. It may just be describing what condition they're under or what is the physical space they're in. For example, if he's by a river, he talks about a poem that's referring to something river, water. That's not necessarily connected to anything apart from show off that he's well educated. And this is very interesting for the writer to add that in because this is a character who had a really bad childhood and he probably didn't get well educated by his parents. And sometimes when people don't have something, they would revengefully try to get more of that. So I can totally see as he grows up on his own, he taught himself. And there's definitely an overcompensation going on with that, which results in him really liking to show off his literature knowledge. Early on in episode 2, when he tried to convince Zhou Zishu taking the same ferry as he does to go to Jinhu Shanzhuang, the mirror.
So again, she looks so nice. Like, where does she get all of these? They look gorgeous.
Lake Manor. He said 2 lines from a poem to send Zhou Zishu off. 但度无所苦，我自迎接汝. It's not a very famous poem. You do have to Google it. This poem is written in Dongjing, Eastern Jin dynasty by Wang Xianzhi. He had a very adored concubine. And this girl often takes this ferry at this place called Taoyedu, Peach Leaf Ferry Crossing. And he wrote a series of poems describing their life when the girl goes to the ferry point and comes back and he always goes there to greet her. 但度无所苦. I hope your ferry crossing is smooth. There will be no difficulty because it is a place where the water is quite turbulent. 我自迎接汝. I will come and greet you. So as you can tell, Wen Kexing just does not miss any opportunity to flirt.
No, definitely not. But also, that's amazing, like thinking about the amount of time and effort that the script writers probably put into this, trying to like refer to things that imply their relationship in a way that is not too overt as to avoid censorship. And as someone mentioned, this wasn't necessarily, many of the poems that are referred to in the series wasn't actually in the books. It was kind of just trying to convey the spirit of the book rather than the word for word telling of the book. So to think that someone sat down and found these poems to include in the script is quite admirable, and yeah, that's amazing.
Then, once they get to the Mirror Lake Manor in the peach flower forest, they had this fight, and then he comes and starts to recite poetry to describe how beautiful Zhou Zishu's steps are. 飘飘兮，若流风之回雪。 仿佛兮若青云之蔽月. This is actually reversed order. In the actual poem, the second line comes first. This comes from a very famous long poem from the Three Kingdoms period from Cao Zhi, the most talented son from Cao Cao. And he had this beautiful poem written, 洛神赋, one of the most famous literature pieces in Chinese history, and it is a long poem talking about the story of a mythical goddess. How beautiful she is. in all kinds of imaginable ways. And these two lines, 飘飘兮若流风之回雪. 飘飘 means the floating state, the very light-weighted floating state. 若 means as, similar to. 流风之回雪. 流风 is the whirl of the wind, and 回雪 is the snow that turns in circles. So it's like your steps is so light-weighted and floaty. It's like the snow that's being blown by the wind and circulating.
That's beautiful imagery. Oh my goodness.
仿佛细若轻云之月, as if light cloud covering the moon. He looks like a beggar.
Oh, I've heard that bit. I don't know why, where I would have heard it, but I've heard that.
So like I doubt how much of 飘飘 and 轻云之月 really is there. But Wen Kexing obviously has X-ray vision, looking through all the disguise and know that this is a really good-looking guy. Then afterwards, he immediately invited Zhou Zishu to drink with him, and Zhou Zishu refused. But
well, I mean, we know his secret. It's all in the shoulder blades.
at the time to invite Zhou Zishu, he used another line from a very famous poem, 花间一壶酒，独酌无相亲. This comes from a very famous poem from Li Bai, the most famous Chinese poet, pretty much widely recognized. And this poem is in our textbook, so every educated Chinese person would remember this poem. It's describing him basically drinking alone at night under the moon in an environment that has a lot of flowers. So it's pretty fitting for Wen Kexing to say that because they're in the forest of flowers. And 花间一壶酒 means a bottle of wine or liquor among the flowers. 独酌无相亲 means drinking alone without other people. And then the later part of the poem will keep talking about his sadness, his being lonely, his dancing in the moon. There's only the moon and his shadow that are his friend. So although it's not directly flirting, it's again being reflecting of the environment they're in and suggesting, I don't want to drink on my own. At the end,
Yeah, like I was about to say, that is kind of the vibe that I'm getting from what she's telling me. So it would still be kind of the thing of, oh, you know, here's this poem, we're in a forest of flowers, but at least we're not alone. So, I don't know.
This episode, they had this quick exchange of their martial arts in the temple, and when they're fighting, you will see 故乡 holding two sticks that have two flat bread going through them, and she's baking them. And when they're fighting, she would kind of imitate the skills they have.
Sorry, my friend and I rewatched. Well, she watched it for the first time. I was introducing her to it, and when we got to this episode, I explained to her about the flatbread because I'd found out about it by that point, and we just couldn't stop laughing because they were not holding back. That was such a brilliant scene.
Have with those two flatbread hitting each other. This is a hidden reference that is not very well known. Most people would miss it, but then because one person digs it out, then the entire internet knows. The flatbread in China is called 烧饼. 贴烧饼 means sticking. 烧饼. During Ming and Qing dynasty, it is a very colloquial slang that just means guy and guy. So 40 audiences here.
The way she expressed that, I mean, accurate.
You're still not aware of that. Well, that is a very interesting sexual reference. In episode 4, when they're having that big fight with the beggars, before that, he said a line taken from very famous Chinese literature and historical writing. 其不闻青盖如故，白首如新. This is a very good line, you should remember it. This comes from 史记, records of Grand Historian, written by Sima Qian in Western Han Dynasty, the greatest monumental historian's record of Chinese history. And in one of its articles, there is a line which says, 有白头如新，青盖如故，白首如新 or 白头如新. Literally means white head as new. Very simple. But what it means is there are people who have lived together until their hair all grows white. They're still as strangers. They don't really know each other. But there's also 青盖如故. 青 means tip something. 盖 is the cover. Here it means the canopy of horse-drawn carriage. 如故 is as old as you've known. But there are also people who only met very briefly as
and
they
have a
pass each
connection.
other when they are on two different cars and the canopy of the car touches. They are as if they've known each other forever. So it's describing the
That's
weirdness
beautiful.
of human relationship. There are types of friendship that just builds up instantly. So basically, Wen Kexing is saying, we've only met, we're pretty much 亲盖, but we can be 如故, we can be actually soulmates, master of flirting. Also in that episode, you'll come across a very interesting line such as 烈女怕缠郎. This has become one of the most famous lines from the drama. 烈女 means the woman who cares about her reputation and chastity very much, but she cannot deal, or eventually she will yield to somebody who is a 缠郎. Lang is a guy. 缠 just means circle around or tie something around something. He also talks about 彻夜吹箫, right? The whole night blowing on the shell, and 丹田隐痛. 丹田 is the area that's below your belly button. And he's saying, I'm using my 内功, my internal sort of the skill and force to help you throughout the night, and now I'm exhausted and then I've hurt myself. But you
Okay, that could have a lot of double meanings.
can totally misinterpret that line, blowing and this part of your belly. You know. Moving on to episode 5, you'll come across Wen Kexing doing something, a action reference to some homosexual content in China's history. Zhou Zishu's sleeve is spotted by the blood of the dead body, and he looks like he really doesn't like it. So Wen Kexing is like, let me help you. He cuts off his sleeve. The sleeve falls onto the ground. This is broken sleeve. 断袖. 断袖 in Chinese means homosexual. And the story behind it is very interesting. Back in
it's like
Western
really,
Han Dynasty, there's an emperor called
interesting.
ID. He has a 面首 or 男宠, which just means a male mistress. The guy is named Dong Xian, and the emperor and Dong Xian.
I can't remember, was this a legend or was like, did it actually happen? Because I found out about it during Modao Zushi. When I was reading the novel, they explained it. I knew about it long before this, but I didn't make the connection originally when I watched it.
Often sleep together. The legend goes that one day the emperor wakes up and he realizes his sleeve has been caught under the body of the lover. But if he pulls the sleeve, he will wake up the guy. He just loves the guy too much. So he used a sword to cut off his sleeve so that he can pull himself free without waking up the guy. This story and this cutting off sleeve becomes a metaphor for homosexuality, because the story is very well known. As soon as they showed up on screen, everybody's like, oh my god, broken sleeve, holy shit. But I was very curious about how it got through censorship, but it did. Good for us. Episode 6, right before they had the fight on the river. And
but I have to say, like, that is one of the cheesiest legends ever, and I love it for that, because yeah, it's really sweet.
Finally, Zhou Zishu loses his disguise. Zhou Zishu is getting away, and Wen Kexing said a line: 你要是走了千山暮雪，我孤一只影向谁去呀? This is a reference to a very famous poem that pretty much every Chinese person knows. It's written around Jin and Mongolian root time. And the poem is talking about the story of two wild swans, because swans are tied with each other. If one dies, the other one wouldn't remarry. So they become the symbol for the loyalty between lovers. And the poem is referring to one swan dies, the other swan is forever lonely. It's a very sad and very famous love poetry, and it's been widely used in all kinds of dramas and stuff. 神雕侠侣, for example, The Return of the Condor Hero, everybody who watches Chinese wuxia knows, and Li Mochou constantly recites this poem. So this is one line from that, which is 千山暮雪，知影向谁去? After one swan dies, for the other swan, thousands of mountains, evening snow, so looking at that view, a lonely shadow, where should it fly to? It has no destination.
Oh my word. That actually also rhymed a bit. But that's amazing, but it also feels like the perfect embodiment for Wen Kexing and Zhou Zishu's relationship, especially because, I mean, they are like the wanderers. They're always spectating, viewing the world together, looking out over the mountains, and if one were to die, the other would. Yeah, that's amazing. I think that one is so far my favorite.
Anymore. Well, A lonely shadow. Where should it fly to? It has no destination anymore. Well, Wen Kexing is basically saying, if you're gone, what am I supposed to do? I'm the lonely swan that loses its partner. When that line came out, because how well known this poem is in China, everybody was like, holy moly, you guys are very, very daring. Then there are little funny references in episode 7 when they're in the restaurant. Wen Kexing tries to make Zhou Zishu to pay. He gave the money to the 小二, and this person said, 客官, 谢谢, thank you, customer. 我去给你找零. I will go and find spare changes. And then Wen Kexing goes, you don't need to go and 找零, right? The money is yours. So this guy is really happy. 找零 has double meaning. On the surface, it means go and find spare change. 找 is find, 零 is zero. In BL world, in Chinese language, 0 is the bottom and 1 is the top. So when Wen Kexing said, you don't need to go and 找零 for me, pretty much as secretly saying, I've already found my 0. In episode 9, when they're looking at those
okay. Okay, yeah, okay.
with people dancing, singing, and playing music, and it becomes a symbol for the ideal retired life of theirs. They talked about the idea of 高山流水,知音难觅, which is very famous in Chinese culture. Tall mountain, flowing river. The person who understands your music is very hard to come across. It's based on a very famous story of two persons. I've mentioned it in my previous poetry videos. Yu Boya and Zhong Ziqi, a person who is master of qin playing and a person who is just a random peasant in the mountain. One day, he's playing, the guy walks by, and the guy actually understands all his music.
This one, someone was kind enough to share with me, and I think I actually pinned the comment in that video. It was just, that's like a very beautiful story. Oh my goodness.
Whatever he's trying to picture in his music, the mountain, the water, whatever, that guy understands. So that immediately becomes 知己. 知音, knowing the music, knowing myself. Well, the translation on YouTube goes for soulmate, which is good enough, but yeah, the actual meaning is the person who understands you fully, totally, completely. It's not even romantic. It's just like the most rare thing that can happen to you, which is you find somebody in this world who fully understand who you really are. In episode 13, they had
she almost, maybe it's just me projecting, but she almost sounded emotional there.
Together that ended up in the quarrel. Before that, though, Zhou Zishu referred to himself as somebody who should end up in the frying pan for like years, and Wen Kexing is like, well, I'll go in with you, right? We'll get fried together. And what they used as a reference is the most famous Chinese breakfast food, the Chinese version of fried donut, not sweetened. It's just two long stick, and it gets big when it gets fried, and it's called 油条. Legend has it this food is invented during Nan Song, Southern Song dynasty, and it's after the death of the very famous patriotic general Yue Fei. He's wronged and then killed by, at the time, Prime Minister Qin Hui. And Qin Hui is a very infamous person in Chinese history. People of the time hated his prime minister so much. The Song dynasty people invented the food 油条, which is two pieces of donut that's twisted together and then thrown into the oil to fry. It represents Qin Hui and his wife. Basically, Wen Kexing is saying, we are tied together like the bad wives and husband in history and get fried. Then, to conclude today's video, we're gonna talk about episode 14. When the big revelation happened, Wen Kexing realized his hope is shattered. The person that he kind of wants to spend the rest of his life with is not gonna live very long, and he's heartbroken, and it rained. When he was playing the xiao on the bridge and Gu Xiang shows up, first he said something while he's sitting there. 风雨如晦，鸡鸣不已，既见君子，云胡不喜. This comes from 诗经, the classic of poetry, one of the oldest collections of poems in Chinese history. And this particular one has multiple interpretations. The surface meaning is 风雨如晦, wind and rain is dark, so it's a bad weather day. 鸡鸣不已, the rooster is crowing unstoppably. 既见君子, since I've met 君子, a gentleman, 云胡不喜, why shouldn't I say I'm happy? It can be interpreted as a romantic poetry of a woman waiting for a man. It could also be used as a metaphor for within a very dark society when things are not going very well. When you meet a person with integrity, why shouldn't you be happy? So here for Wen Kexing, he used it probably because it is raining, it is a bad weather day, he's in the rain and feeling totally shattered.
And he's met someone who is supposed to be the light of his life, and yet he can't be happy about it.
And 既见君子云胡不喜, 君子 clearly is Zhou Zishu. I've met this brilliant person. How can I say that I'm not happy? Well, I'm really unhappy because I know I'm gonna lose him very soon. So I'd say this is a very cleverly picked poem to help Wen Kexing express his feelings at the time. Then he stands up and he recites a poem. This poem is not from history. It's purely written by priest and then added a little bit more by the scriptwriter. So it's like the scriptwriter plus the original novel writer. 两雨之秋，轻无老死，一宿苦寒，戚薄亲. First half. 两雨之秋, cool, rain, nose, autumn. So when the rain is cold, you know autumn, fall, the season of slow death has come. 轻无老死. The green parasol tree dies of old age. Parasol tree in Chinese literature either means somebody who has very high moral integrity, the gentleman, or it represents love. Till death do us apart kind of love. So you can interpret it as somebody of high value, high integrity, and the gentleman dies. So that's also referring to what he thinks of Zhou Zishu, but also a general sad atmosphere. 一宿苦寒戚薄亲.
That's cool that it has that double meaning.
苦寒means bitter, cold. 戚, attack. 薄, thin. 亲 is your quilt. A whole night of cold attacks the very thin bedding I have. It's a very common description in Chinese poetry, using the thin quilt to describe the lonely and sadness. Then the second line, 世事蹉跎，死生契阔，相见恨晚，叹奈何。世事蹉跎. The things in this world are 蹉跎. 蹉跎 is an adjective describing the state of basically feeling you've wasted all your time and not really getting anywhere or doing anything. You feel no result is produced. The things in this world, all your endeavors often leads to nothing.
Oh, hell. I mean, I think they did an okay job translating it. Because I did get that from what the translation said, but it still hits so hard thinking about it, especially now that I've gone past the point where we find out who Wen Kexing's parents are. This, rings even truer.
Nothing, you kind of have worked so hard for everything and then just doesn't end anywhere. 死生契阔 is a line also from 诗经. Also a poem that has multiple references. Some people like to use it to reference romantic love. Some people like to use it to reference the soldierly brotherhood between people who are on the battlefield. I'd say both are applicable.
Yeah,
死, death,
I would agree.
生, life. 契阔 means coming together and then breaking up. So life and death, separation and reunion. In the original poem,
I mean, that also is like a perfect depiction, not just obviously on the surface, as she said, the lovers or soldiers, but also the separation and reunion of our two main characters and the life and the death that they face together and apart. I really love the fact that there was so much thought put into this, which, I mean, it should be. Like, poetry is supposed to have like layers and things like that, but it's so interesting to see all those layers being peeled back and explained in a way that makes everything make even more sense.
The whole thing basically is 死生契阔，与子成说，执子之手，与子偕老, which means I promise you me and you promise me you, no matter it's life or death or separation or your reunion, I will always be with you. I'll hold your hand and grow old. So it just uses a quarter of that thing to represent the whole meaning here, which means I want to make that promise with you, life and death. But then 相见恨晚，叹奈何. 相见恨晚 is a very common idiom. Two people meet, but regret it was too late. That is what he thinks of their meeting.
Remember that.
Had we met earlier, wouldn't that be great? 叹奈何, 叹 is exclaim. 奈何, if you watched my stream earlier on, you know what it means. There's nothing you can do. It's that helpless state. So you let out this big sighing. We've met too late. What can I do? That is a totally made up poem from the scriptwriter plus the original writer. And it's pretty well written. It has a lot of reference to Chinese traditional history and symbolism and metaphor, and it's very fitting for Wen Kexing to say such a thing at the time. So that concludes episode 1 to episode 14. All the worth talking about literature references, things that's been very secretive or not so secretive about the flirtatious nature. As the story progresses, there are more literature references. Once I've collected more, I think that's worth making a video about. I will do that.
Oh wow, okay, so I don't think she's made another one of these, but if she has, I will definitely be watching that. This was so good. I love the way she breaks things down, makes it like easy to understand, digestible, and you really get a chance to kind of just absorb it, because as beautiful as the poetry is within the actual show, and as beautiful as Wen Kexing actually recites them, like I think he does a really good job with it. It's very rhythmic. You can clearly tell when he's saying poetry versus when he's just talking normally. But as much as that is the case, you know, you're caught up in the action, you're trying to follow the story, so you don't always get a lot of time to pause and savor it. So yeah, anyway, I'm very glad I watched it. I really enjoyed it. It's so interesting, and as I said, it adds another layer to an already extremely complex and beautiful story. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed my reaction, and otherwise I'll see you guys again next time. 再见。